Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech. Yesterday, we gave you the number one question coming out of the open week. Sounds like we got an answer.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And thanks as always for making us your first listen. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. So visit FanDuel.com to get started with the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you today as we are looking ahead to another Big 12 ball game. No more open weeks. Well, we'll have one in a few weeks, but not this time around as the Red Raiders return to Jones Stadium to host the Baylor Bears 3 o'clock on Saturday afternoon for a homecoming matchup. And I want to get into some thoughts today from Texas Tech head coach Joey McGuire on a couple of different things. We'll get into some of his thoughts on his defense in some recent weeks, particularly what they've been doing against opposing ground games. Also, what he wants to see happen with his offensive line. And there was an indication that we'll see the same faces in the same 5 places. So that's a good thing rolling into another conference ball game. And also a thought on what we could see on the back end of that secondary, and still remaining somewhat fluid as you and I are having that conversation, because we don't know exactly about one particular impact player there or the health of one particular impact player there. But he'll have a thought on Chapman Lewis as well coming up. We'll get into in just a moment. But wanted to kick off the episode going back to yesterday, and what I said was the number one question coming out of the open week. Hey, did you get healthier? And I think we got an answer to that question. So much so that whenever I kicked out the injury report for this week to our Matador Mob insiders, it was response after response after response of, that's it? Did the list cut off? Are you giving them to us one at a time to build tension, which I would never do? What's going on? Because it was only Chapman Lewis that was on the questionable list, which is a very short list for a Texas Tech fan this year. So I guess we got our answer that while not perfect, you seemingly did get a lot healthier over the open week.
Pretty clean report. You're right. Javion Wilcox, who hasn't played at all this year, and then Dylan Shaw probably wasn't expected to play. They're also on it, listed as out for this week. But, yeah, really, it was just Chapman Lewis sitting there by himself. And I think that's the beauty of a bye week. Now, granted, I think Baylor is going to have a lot less issue from an injury standpoint, too. And they had several guys that were battling, things as well. But I'm sure you'll see a much healthier version of the Bears from a Red Raider standpoint. It's really just a free safety. And, and I think you've moved further enough along to where the Adedire and Dylan Spencer injuries, the Cameron Valdez injury, and the Vinny Scurry injury, you're in like phase 2 now, to where you've kind of dealt with that and processed it and replaced these players in every case, and I think I would say that you have comfortably replaced them. Although Scurry is probably the one that you certainly him and Adedire, but I think that with Taj doing what he's doing, I don't think you miss Valdez, and I think that now you get to kind of unleash some depth on the defensive ends, outside linebacker / position, because you had the Cedar Hill boys, in Tucson starting with Harvey Dyson and Charles Esters. You had, Terrell Tillman and Rigsby and, guys like that is depth. But now you're going to welcome back Isaac Smith and Amir Washington to the party. And so it sounds like unleash the depth. And now you've got some – because I think everybody kind of attributed the way you played violently, the way you played faster, the way you were more aggressive, is that we had fresh bodies out there. So when we get them out there, they're playing, they're giving us more and limited reps, if that makes sense, because we're not wearing anybody down. And I think that free safety spot, I would say this. You're much better off there than I would have thought whenever Chapman went out versus Cincy. I think, not that it stays this way, but I think Devin Cromwell and Jordan Sanford were pretty good in Tucson. And now they'll both have a couple more weeks of practice, under their belt going into this game if you don't have Chapman. But we shall see.
Before we get into that conversation with the secondary a little bit further, and I want to listen to this comment from Coach McGuire talking about those two guys. Going back to the running back mention there, I've been a little surprised that over the last few weeks we have not seen like a whole lot of anything beyond 28. It's like a little dab of Dickey, a little dab of Dickey will do you. Every once in a while, I would have thought we would see more. Jacoby Williams, unless I've miscounted somewhere, I think could still even have a red shirt preserved at this point in time, if I'm not mistaken. May have missed it by one or something, but we haven't seen him hardly at all. Do you think if Valdez was still healthy, would we be seeing more of a second running back, or was this – I know this is speculation. It's an impossible question to answer, but was this always kind of the way that it was going to go in general, that, man, it's Taj time all the time? What do you think about how the depth of that position has rounded out with Valdez on the shelf, but what looks like, at least in the case of Cameron Dickey, a capable RB2? What do you think?
I mean, we've talked about this a lot. I think ideally in a meeting, you talk about the right things. In a media setting in front of people, you talk about the right things, and you say, "Yeah, we're going to get." And I just think when you get to a Saturday afternoon, you have the best of intentions. We need to preserve Taj. We need to get these other guys in the game and develop them. And you find yourself in these close games. Boy, that's hard. It's hard to justify when push comes to shove. That's why I think the North Texas game was so good. And I think it's fun to win these close games, but it'd be nice to put a team away and you can benefit from it in an instance like this.
Yeah.
I think I just know Kenny Perry goes into these games going, I've got every fourth series, every fifth series, let's get Cam or Jacoby in there, whatever. And it just hasn't necessarily worked because of the score. And now you find yourself in a situation where, I mean, you're trying to win, man. I mean, you're trying to win, and at all costs, and it's just hard when he's sitting over there. I mean, unless he's said, "Hey, I can't go anymore." I'll tell you what else. I think that the Jalen Conyers aspect of this has maybe helped or alleviated some of that need for other guys to get carries or be in the game too. So I don't want to, get that lost on anything, but yeah, I mean, I totally get what you're asking. I just smile as soon as you brought it up because I get it. And we talked about this a lot, and that is absolutely ideally what you would want to do. But he's just a lot better than everybody. And, right. And if you tell me the other day that he's going to fumble twice and you're going to win the game, I probably don't believe you. But that short of that, it's just hard to justify him being over there unless he's just – now, having said all this, Calvin, if you keep running him 32 times-ish a game, whatever, hovering around that, I think you get diminishing returns as you go. That's why a bye week like this is just as big for a guy like Taj, who is healthy as anybody.
Yeah.
That's why if you can get through this next 4-game stretch and have that second bye week, it's also huge for a guy like Taj because you're trying to keep him fresh, and hopefully there's more games, after your regular season finale there versus West Virginia at home the Saturday after Thanksgiving. So, yeah. But yeah, I totally get it. But that's maybe
kind of always the way it was going to go, even if Valdez was healthy, because I don't I mean,
I don't buy. Yeah, I'm with you. I don't buy that Cam Valdez would have been taking a bunch of these carries.
I don't think so either.
I don't buy it. Yeah.
With all due respect to him, I don't know that there's a whole lot of difference in the way I view him versus Dickey necessarily. So I don't know if there's some like big different presence in that room. If he was a healthy guy, Taj Brooks is just really good, as you said. He's a lot better than some of the other options, and a lot of that credit goes to 28 for making it that way. Which, by the way, an open week, good for him. Comfortable margin of victory also might be good for him. Fourth quarter, where maybe he's got a ball cap or a bucket hat on, might also be comfortable for him. Coach McGuire asked about winning these one-score ball games, being in so many one-score ball games. He talked about it taking some years off of his life. He also mentioned that the First Lady of Texas Tech football, Mrs. Debbie McGuire, would like a little cushion. So she's out there with us, preferring maybe a little cushion in some of these ball games moving forward. And that could get Brooks a breather here or there. But let's get back to the situation going on in the secondary, because this one has become really intriguing for a lot of good reasons, I guess. Like, a lot of this is actually positive, even though the crux of it was sort of Chapman Lewis having to leave the ball game and missing a ball game. Let's first take a listen to Red Raider head coach Joey McGuire discussing that situation with Lewis and Devin Cromwell, who was in there making an impact last time we saw the Red Raiders. First, today's episode brought to you by Roy, and it's time to highlight the LOTT Roy Player of the Week. Roy is a new platform that lets fans make contributions directly to their favorite athletes. So download Roy for iOS or Android and enter our referral code LOCKEDON, and you'll automatically be entered into a sweepstakes to win $5,000 cash. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. This week, well, we're coming off of an open week, so we're going back to last week to spread the love even further, this time to our guy, Quincy Ledet Jr. for the tipped ball interception, complete with some yards after the catch and a big man hurdle. Certainly worth rewarding. I don't go to sleep with sugar plums dancing in my head. Instead, it's a 300-pounder taking flight over a would-be tackler. So for that, we're kicking Quincy $100 on Roy. If you were as impressed as we were with his performance last Saturday in Tucson, you can show him some love too. Just hop on Roy and throw in whatever you feel like. Any amount will be adding up fast. Now you have the chance to show your appreciation for Quincy and his standout performance. Just download Roy for iOS or Android and enter our referral code Locked On, and you're going to also automatically be entered for that $5,000 cash sweepstakes. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. What are you waiting for? Get off the sidelines and into the NIL game with Roy. Let's first take a listen to Red Raider head coach Joey McGuire discussing that situation with Lewis and Devin Cromwell, who was in there making an impact last time we saw the Red Raiders.
We're trending in a good direction with Chappie. Anytime it's questionable, I usually feel like we're in an 80 to plus chance of those guys playing. But Devin's going to play, and that's the thing we kind of talked about a couple weeks ago with him, coming out and saying, hey, Coach, I'll do whatever we need to do. I'll tell you, I was really excited about his physicality. There was a couple that he came up and made some big hits and didn't bring his arms with him, to wrap up. But I thought his physicality, he's got really good speed. He's a vet. I think that's going to help us in the long run, because now we could take a little bit off of Chappie. So both of them are going to play whenever we're fully healthy, and then I think he'll keep getting better. The other thing that I thought that he and CJ did well is the communication, which has been something that has hurt us in the passing game, is our lack of communication. But for him to be able to get into some coverages and let CJ play the post, makes a big difference. And so I think, him being comfortable to play man on a slot, him being comfortable to be in the post, him being able to come comfortable to play some of our zone coverages makes a big difference. But the biggest thing that I saw from him was his physicality and ability to tackle in open space.
So I was actually talking about this with one of our Matador mobsters, old Roy, or maybe young Roy or middle-aged Roy, I'm not sure, but Roy and I were having this conversation. He was kind of asking about shuffling pieces back into place if you get a return. Do you play a hot hand or continue to play what looked like a hot hand against Arizona? And I think this is made even more interesting, Chris, because it's not just about Chapman Lewis, but Jordan Sanford factoring in also, who suffered an injury in the same game that Lewis did. He did return to that game. But I was interested to see Cromwell out there last time around when maybe I was banking more on seeing Sanford going, and Cromwell handled himself well. So I'm wondering, even with, say, if Lewis is healthy, which that was an interesting comment in passing, questionable is 80% plus to Joey McGuire to play. Anybody else notice that? I'm kind of wondering where Sanford factors in, where Cromwell factors in. I'm assuming, I guess, if Chapman Lewis is available, he's still your number one option there. But how do you sort this out? Because there's a lot going on here.
Yeah, I would think 80% or better would be probable.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at injury reports, only Joey and DeRuyter and probably Chapman will know at what level he's at or what he can or cannot handle as the week goes along. And that probably determines, a full go and with no restriction or he's just fine. I think he probably goes back to where he's at in the starting lineup. He was really good. It's not like he's missed 6 weeks. He's just missed one game and the better part of another. But I think, to Joey's point, I think now you feel better about that position. That's why I said a while ago, I think you feel better about just that spot in general whenever Lewis went out. And it's funny because I saw all the texts and the questions in on the Matador Mob Insider to us about Lewis and lots of questions about him. And it's just interesting to me that how much of a name that a true sophomore has already made, in that everybody kind of going, oh man, and I think that's a compliment, for a guy that hadn't played a ton of football here, if we're being honest. And, but I think Cromwell he's an older player. I think that the thing about Cromwell is that, Joey talked about the week leading up to the Arizona game. Sanford has that bum hand or thumb or whatever it was, because that big cast kind of thing on it. It's not clubbed up, so he can. There's a brace on his thumb, but him and Cromwell were going to battle it out. And Joey said, or maybe it was DeRuyter said, we kind of told him, hey, open competition. May the best man win, and Cromwell won it. But I think they both played pretty well, and I think they both used the word physicality. So if I gleaned anything from yesterday's press conference, listening to Joey and Tim talk about maybe what they learned about themselves over the last couple of weeks, or how they will operate going forward, if you pick up on enough of it, there's two things that I probably was able to determine. And because he mentions it in that clip a second ago. I think what Cromwell did is two things that they're looking for. And if you can't do these things, then you're probably off on the side and, hey, we'll talk to you later, fellas, or hey, we'll get to you if we can. And that is, he mentions the word physicality and great tackling in the open field and all those things. And there's a couple times where he doesn't bring his arm. So there's a lot of talk about tackling, okay? The other thing was, I thought he and CJ communicated well. Yeah. So those are the buzzwords that I think that they've tried to determine maybe some of their issues in the secondary is, if you can't communicate, we don't care how old, fast, how much potential you might have. If you can't communicate well, you're not understanding what call we're in, or you can't communicate it to your other players or understand what another player is telling you, you can't help us. And that's causing us major problems. 2, if you can't tackle in the open field, because this is a wide open league and the sport is wide open, and you've got to be able to tackle in space, you've also got to be able to help out in the run game and be very physical, which we saw quite a bit in Tucson. You had commented how much Macho and Mo Horn and some of those corners even were just kind of getting involved in the run game, sticking their neck in there and all those things. So if you're not involved in some of those things, or can't be involved positively, not going to happen for you. And I think that's probably one thing or two things that I gleaned from listening to them talk about what they learned about themselves, and maybe why they feel pretty good about Devin Cromwell back there because he checked both boxes.
Yeah, and I guess that's also why Coach McGuire mentioned that even if Chapman Lewis is back, Devin Cromwell is going to play. He talked about them being a faster team when he was on the field, and then obviously the things that you mentioned there and the physicality and his ability to communicate being things that he had done very well. So can't wait to find out if Lewis is back in the mix. But a little bit of an injury here has spurred on a little development, I guess, that we may have not seen otherwise.
And I think that's the way it's supposed to work, man. Next man up. And it doesn't always work that way. And you go, God, when can insert name here please get back? We're gagging here.
We still want him back. I'm not acting like it's just
definitely
a problem, but
because I think with Lewis, I mean, he's one of the best tacklers on your team. And I think he's not the biggest guy, but that's never, caused any problems really. And I think, that's the thing about playing him as a true freshman, I was a true sophomore, is that, he's not as big as he eventually will be, but hopefully you get around to that before he does depart. The other thing that I thought that Tim talked about along these lines with your DBs and things like that is,
first, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. And NFL fans, you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Say you're watching a game, you get hit with a hunch, an instinctual calling. Well, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're going to place your bets to keep up with everything going down in real time as you submit that slip. And right now, FanDuel is going to get you started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's right, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed with only a $5 bet out the gate at FanDuel.com.
He'd gotten that eraser out several weeks ago, and we're putting too much on him. And I think he went into this deal saying, I noticed we're playing a lot faster and more physical. And now we're able to do a bit more with these guys because they've got that many more reps and there's that much more practice that we've been able to invest in them. And they're starting to see it at live speed and all those things. So your defense, I think, and not just Devin Cromwell, but your defense is progressing in front of your eyes, I think, right now. And it's kind of fun to think about what it may look like when you have all your pieces available to you.
Yeah, no doubt. And we'll circle back to that theme before we get out of here, because it sounds like that's happening not only maybe on the back end, but up front as well, and is paying off in a way when it comes to what you're doing against the run or in your defensive box. I want to get to the trenches in general, because Coach McGuire spoke not only on what's happening up front defensively, but also what he's really needing to see up front offensively. As you and I know, going back to some comments from a week ago, they were not happy with what was happening with the offensive line against Arizona, even in a winning effort. And Coach McGuire this week picked that conversation back up.
We've got to be a lot better than we were against Arizona. We've talked about that a lot. I showed 2 examples yesterday. The frustrating thing, and we didn't get to talk as much about Arizona than after watching film, but the backside of the play, how much we have to strain. If you go and watch the Arizona tape, there is a lot of times that the nose that's slanted away from the play is spinning back, and he's the first guy to hit Taj, or whether it's going to the right or left. We've got to have I think it's pride in that my guy's not going to make the tackle, but I think it's understanding that Taj Brooks can end up anywhere. And so whenever you got a guy like that, it's very important. We're straining, and I'm really proud of them at the point of attack. They get the play started, but the backside. So we've got to get better at that. We're going to see a lot of games out of these guys. And whenever it's passing down, we got to get better at that. But the biggest thing, I think, that where we've improved, and I don't know if I can give you 3 things, but I just think these guys, the physicality that they want to play with in the run game, and their mindset of taking things personal but not getting down and really wanting to work and improve on the things that we got to get better at. I think, you're going to have the same starting 5 for the 3rd week. So I think there'll be improvement there just with the chemistry with those guys starting together.
So it sounds like he's just kind of saying, even if the play is not drawn up to be headed your way, we need more out of you because
block longer.
For longer, yeah.
Yeah.
The strain factor.
Yeah, hold your block. I think there was probably a lot of yards left on the table when they went back and looked at it that Taj could have gotten if guys semi away from the play or in the opposite direction of where the play is going, if they just hold their block longer instead of turning them loose. And so hold your block for 4 seconds, not just 2, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm just making that up, but yeah, that's the general idea. And I think they clearly saw that right away because he's talked about that in back-to-back press conferences. So,
yeah,
I mean, and there may come a time where you obviously didn't need it this time because you got away with the win and everything, but there may come a time where that happens on a third down that you can't convert because somebody didn't hold their block long enough, and now we're 2 yards short, and then we don't convert a fourth down or whatever. Yeah. But it's a game of inches, and in these close games, that's sometimes the difference when you get right down to it is some of that kind of stuff. And I think they're trying to get it corrected. Identified it is the first challenge, and then getting it corrected, getting it coached up, and getting it instilled in some of your guys is certainly something that's the task now.
Well, and I think as he talks about Taj Brooks can wind up anywhere all over the field, part of that, I guess, could be based in some agility or his ability to evade a tackler. But I think a lot of it also is the fact that a play could be going on a lot longer than you might anticipate because he might look like he's smothered and covered, and then boom, all of a sudden he's breaking tackles and, hey, the play's still going. So let's go ahead and keep hands on these guys in front of us. A lot easier said than done. But, man, I am glad to hear that obviously you don't want any change as a result of injury, but I'm also glad to hear that they have seen enough, even though they weren't happy with what they saw against Arizona, to say these are our 5 guys in these spots that allow us to be the most physical, and we're going to keep riding with that. So I hope that will continue. He talked about, that really being the goal of wanting to be as physical as they can be. And with Rodgers at right tackle, Porsche there in at left guard, that's the look that gave them the ability to be the most physical. So we'll continue to see that happen. And, obviously take some time to establish some chemistry among those 5 guys where that is of vital importance. So curious to see what it's going to look like against the Baylor Bears.
And it's I know we're about to move on, but it's just fascinating to me that this is kind of maybe the group that you're going to roll with here. And this isn't anywhere near the group that we would have thought would end up being where they are right. Back in August. We never discussed like this concoction of pieces and places just because, injuries dictated that, comfortability has dictated that.
But you also said, you're like, this is what it's going to look like until you get somewhere and all of a sudden there's reason for change. But going back to fall camp, that's exactly what we saw happen.
Yep. I mean, again, mid-September is a lot different than mid-October, and here we are. I mean, and that's just the way it was going to go. Rare is it that you're like, okay, here we go. It's going to work fine, no issue, and we're just going to roll with it. And this is going to be what we do for the next, 3 to 4 months. And that's not what happened. But I'm not shocked because that's typically this is what you're seeing in the way it goes. And hopefully you do get some continuity and improvement, and they take the coaching and are better from having their head coach kind of call them out on some of this stuff, like with backside blocks and all these things, and they're better for it. But we never thought Sterling Porsche was going to be at a guard, and we never thought that ultimately that Caleb Rogers was going to be back at right tackle. Right. But again, or that Dalton Merriman was going to be amongst the starting group.
We're going way back that Sheridan Wilson was going to be your center. I mean, there's pretty much nothing about this line that like a year ago we were like, yeah, that's what you're building towards.
Yep, but here we are.
I mean, almost nothing. Davion Carter was like not even being mentioned as among the starters in fall camp. And then he's been one of your constants along with Sheridan Wilson. But, yeah, it's just been wild to see. And now we sit here midway through the season, and this is the group we continue to roll with. Let's flip it over to the other side really quickly. There's been a lot that ain't been pretty about the defense for Texas Tech this year. particularly in the Big 12 conference as well, even though I know we've touched on some of that trending in a positive direction in conference play. You've had two of your better days of the season recently over the last 3 games. Cincinnati, as you may guess, will be the exclusion among that group, as 555 was put up. But I want to take a listen to Coach McGuire talking about, and he touches on something you've already touched on for the defense at large, but talking about the run defense, what they've been able to achieve. And it seems like simplifying, again, has been the theme of the day that has allowed you to improve in some of these areas. Here again is Coach McGuire.
2 things. Like anytime you can improve on the run, you're going to improve in red zone because it's harder to run the ball in. But going back, I think, our guys being able to really get our – if you look, we're really trying to keep the calls where we're not moving as much in the box. I mean, the linebackers have to move based off of formation and everything, but, you hear coaches talk about it all the time. The more you can get your box to have their feet in the ground before the ball snapped and identify gaps. I think the other thing that we've done really well and continue to do, and anytime we've given up a big run is because we haven't done this, is setting the edge of the defense. I mean, it's helped that Charles Esters has come back, but really identifying and setting the edge, to where we've probably played more 9 techniques and 7 techniques than we have a 6 technique. So a more head up, more outside, really giving a definitive edge. That helps everything behind it. That helps your safeties know, hey, he's got the edge, now I can fit my gap versus coming down and being indecisive, like, oh, he's got this gap, well, I got to help him here. And so that's helped a lot. I think our tackling is continuing to improve. And, man, if Jacob Rodriguez can have another game like he did last week and build off of that, I think that's going to be big. I think that's one thing too, man. We could play like – I don't know if we necessarily – I think Jacob Rodriguez was dominant without a doubt. But if you look at our box, I don't know necessarily if we have like somebody that just comes out and dominates the game, where what we've been able to is be able to dominate at times – because of our depth. We play so many people and there's not somebody out there playing 90 snaps. We've got guys that are really fresh, so it allows them to play as hard as they could play, whoever that is. Some are better than others, but we're getting the hardest we could play out of that one guy. And so I think that's making the difference in both. And then, in the red zone, I think we've got a really good set of what we know we could call. The guys feel comfortable in those calls, and it shrinks the field a little bit. So there's less space, and that helps us.
Kind of a bewildering year, I got to admit, defensively. There have been like some weeks where I'm thinking, wow, and then some other weeks where I'm thinking, wow. And those are 2 different variations on wow. I mean, your rush defense, Chris, your best day of the year came against one of the conference's most productive backs, who just went for 158 and 182 over the last 2 weeks in Cameron Scadaboo against Utah and Kansas. You held him to one of his worst days of the year. I don't honestly know what to make of it, but it seems like they are making progress. I don't know if I'm using the word dominate, but obviously against Arizona, one of your best showings yet.
Well, it's trending. Like, if you just look at it, I mean, the whole thing is just trending the right way. And you hope there's no, 1 step forward, 2 steps back game coming up or anything. But I think as the year started, they talked a lot about, strength in numbers, and the strength of our defense is our depth, and we're going to unleash it. We're going to play a lot of these guys. And I think that didn't exactly work very well to start because of so much inexperience. And then when you're putting depth pieces in there that are also inexperienced, maybe you even get less experienced, and it just kind of one problem compounds the other. And then we have to get back and kind of, okay, let's just simplify. Let's eliminate a lot of these things to allow you to play fast. Then you get a bunch of guys injured, and so you're less depth or deep in some instances at outside linebacker and in the secondary. And so fewer guys are getting to play, so you can't. But now you're starting to see kind of ultimately what they envisioned for this side of the ball. And as long as it continues to trend the right way, I'm here for it. You knock on wood and hope that you can remain healthy like you appear to be, and you get Chapman back. But because they played a lot of guys, and it's using all of your pieces in a way that best fits their skill set, like Mike Dingle. You've seen this now, and Baylor's probably seen it too. Like if Sawyer Robertson were to see Mike Dingle, he probably knows, okay, you're spying me, so that's one less guy I've got to worry about elsewhere. So you can only have these bells and whistles, and surprises, so often until people realize, okay, this is what they're doing. But having said that, a guy like Dingle, when he sees him out there, it's like, well, if I start to run, I don't have a lot of time at all because he's going to hunt me down. But I think that's Tim basically utilizing what is available to him, and it just appears that there's some improvement here. Statistically, it's still not very good, but I think that we would agree it's trending. And now you have an example. Part of your body of work is like, totally holding Scadaboo down. And yeah, he got loose for one long pass play, and due to some miscommunication back on some of the things that they found that they didn't like when they started to look back, which I think they probably already knew that. But anyway, to sum that up, I think you're seeing it trend the right way. And can it continue to trend the right way with all these pieces available to you now? Are they getting it? Are they understanding more of the scheme, and you can now utilize more of the scheme and really confuse guys? Like, because the quarterbacks you're going to see in the coming weeks are all going to be pretty tough. You're going from Sawyer Robertson, who is more than capable, Hoover, who is in the top in the statistical category in a lot of the things in the country, Rocco Becht, who is maybe as hot as any QB in the country, and then Shedeur Sanders the week after that, who is a superstar in college that's going to be a top 10 NFL draft pick that was losing his guys over the weekend and still made it a game just because they couldn't tackle him. He's just running around and I'll make a play. So you need it to continue to trend because the competition's about to get a lot tougher.
Yeah, and even if statistically it's ugly, you got 9 takeaways in the last 4 weeks. And we know that column always covers for a multitude of sins otherwise. Scadaboo 3.3 per carry in Lubbock. He hadn't gone for anything less than 7 per carry the last 2 weeks. I think it was 7-2 and 7-3 against Kansas and Utah. So whatever you were able to do to figure it out that time around, continue to do so and continue taking the football away. That's an easy thing to say, not so easy to do, but they've been doing it regularly over the last month or so.
Yeah, I'll leave you with one stat. I think right now Iowa State, the highest ranked team in the conference. Their defense is thought to be one of the best in the conference, maybe in the country to this point. They have, just try this one on. You need to start to living in this space. To this point, they have 10 interceptions and have only allowed 7 touchdowns.
That's good. It's a good ratio.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
That's a good ratio.
Yeah.
Let me write that down. Save that.
Yeah. I'd like to try on those shoes. Sir, can I just wear them out? I'll buy them. I just want to wear them out. Yeah.
Yeah. You can keep my old shoes. I'm taking these.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's salty to say the least. Chris, appreciate the time as always, man. Good stuff today. Enjoyed it. And we'll see you for the next one.
Yeah, man. We'll talk to everybody tomorrow. Appreciate it. Keep hope alive, everybody.
Get subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. Thanks, as always, a big tip of the cap to those everydayers out there who are joining us every day. It's right there in the name. And if you're one of those, you need to be a Matador Mob insider. Your direct line to Chris and myself. If you're watching on YouTube, you can hit the QR code there to try on a free 14-day trial. If not, check out the show notes for the link there. Appreciate those who are chopping it up with us inside the Matador Mob daily. All right. Appreciate your time as always. And of course, one of the best ways to help us grow the show is to comment anything below. So dive on in. The water is warm. For Chris, I'm Casey. We hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.